at-home COVID testing. There's a lot to discuss, including the Supreme Court delivering the largest blow to the Biden administration, with them striking down the vaccine mandate on large businesses. Let's get started. America, the meager. From empty shelves to lack of tests, shortages of workers to, yes, even a disinterest in joining the military. The United States people are left wanting. Meanwhile, politicians are inserting themselves in a foreign conflict, any foreign conflict it seems.
It is Russia, as you have heard, that has a stark choice to make. De-escalation and diplomacy, which of course remains our preferred course, or confrontation and consequences. Our goal remains the complete denuclearization of the Korean Peninsula, and we continue to believe that serious and sustained diplomacy is the only way we'll be able to make tangible progress towards that.
Now, I still can't decide if the focus on foreign conflict is more about getting money back into the greedy hands of defense contractors or to distract from this situation here at home. But one thing is for certain, if a 2-year-old virus and a few inches of snow can cause this big of a disruption in the supply chain, just imagine how upset Americans will be if we go to war and we completely break the chain altogether. Now, shortages at U.S. grocery stores have become more and more common all in the recent weeks as the fast-spreading Omicron variant and severe weather have piled on to the already existing supply chain issues and labor shortages. So for more on this issue and what we can expect moving forward, we bring in RT correspondent Paxton Boyd.
Shelves are empty of beef, chicken, eggs, fruit, and vegetables, even non-perishable items, hard to find in some grocery stores. Now, in a normal year, 5 to 10% of food items may be unavailable. Today, roughly 15% are out of stock. That according to Jeff Freeman, president and CEO of the Consumer Brands Association. Officials say things may not get better for the next 12 to 18 months. Now, there are many reasons for this, including an increased demand for groceries with families choosing to eat at home during the Omicron surge. As we saw here in the D.C. metro area last week, winter storms have affected major interstates, and a shortage of as many as 80,000 truck drivers are out nationwide. That's a historic high, according to the American Trucking Association. Because of this, experts say to expect price hikes and food shortages similar to what we saw in 2020. In Colorado, nearly 8,400 employees at Kroger-owned stores have gone on strike over pay and working conditions. Now, here's what you're seeing as a result. On Tuesday, Walmart, Kroger, and Albertsons stocks dipped. Albertsons taking the biggest hit, indicating a trend among major grocers being affected by these supply chain issues. Also, these trips to the grocery store are going to cost consumers even more, with inflation soaring to 7% for the first time in 4 decades. Now, with the United States seeing more than 700,000 cases of COVID-19 per day on average during this Omicron surge, it's slowing down food manufacturers and causing grocery store workers to call out sick.
And we heard reports from companies talking about they've had more positive tests in the past 2 weeks than they had in all of 2020. Those positive tests are taking people off the front lines. It's forcing companies to shut down manufacturing lines preemptively, and it's leading to just simply not enough supply.
Now, experts say store shelves may not return to normal until this pandemic lets up, staffing returns to normal, and the global food distribution network is restored. For RT America, I'm Paxton Boyd in Washington, D.C.
So let's discuss further and bring in our panel, Richard Wolff, economic professor and author of The Sickness in the System, When Capitalism Fails to Save Us from Pandemics or Itself, as well as Steve Gill, former USTR official under Bush and Clinton. Thanks for joining me, gentlemen.
Thank you.
Thank you.
So the U.S. government has devoted $4.5 trillion in total aid spending to combating the effects of the coronavirus, including the economic effects. Yet America has bare shelves and lack of workers. So, Dr. Wolff, with all of the money devoted, why didn't it work?
We have systemic problems in our economic system. They've been accumulating for a long time. They've been kicked down the road. We have imagined that we have the best system in the world, and therefore all our problems will be solved. It's childish. We should not have done it. We should have gotten a wake-up call with how badly we've done in managing this COVID compared to many other countries, but we didn't. Look, a supply chain, everybody who runs a business knows you have to take steps to cover the eventuality that your inputs or your labor can't come to work. We're in the middle of a COVID disaster for 2 years. You must have understood you have to have backup. You have to have workers that will come if the front line doesn't. You have to take those steps, and they're going to cost you money, and they're going to eat into your profits. But if you don't do it, well, then we get the situation with which you opened the program.
And I think one of the things that's most frustrating about this, Dr. Wolf, is even if companies had those backup plans ready to go, they were not anticipating how much the government was going to involve themselves in. That's what I want to throw to you, Steve. This hashtag Bare Shelves Biden is being used. So is it fair to put all of the blame on this administration and the decisions made by Congress just this past year?
Well, it's fair to put most of the blame certainly on them, but I'd agree with Dr. Wolf that, this has been a problem that's been building for a while. We've had companies in the U.S. that have increasingly relied upon just-in-time delivery, and when there's any disruption in that process, just-in-time becomes not in enough time, and we're seeing some of that. But you've also seen the Biden administration not spend all that COVID money, hundreds of billions of dollars that were supposed to go to buying tests, to buying the therapeutics, to helping ease the process. And then, of course, we now get reports that the CDC and others were blocking the use of ivermectin and other therapeutics, hydroxychloroquine, because it didn't fit politics. So the politics of the Biden administration, including cutting off the pipeline of our fuel, our oil, that has helped raise prices at the grocery store, helped slow the price of goods coming back down, even when oil prices stop rising and maybe just kind of pause for a moment. All of the policies the Biden administration have done have helped turn a difficult situation into a catastrophic situation.
And that's where we are today. And yet we're looking for answers or how to solve it. Or more importantly, politicians are looking who to blame. Senator Elizabeth Warren actually tweeted out, what happens when only a handful of giant grocery stores chains like Kroger dominate an industry? They can force high food prices onto Americans while racking in record profits. We need to strengthen our antitrust laws to break up giant corporations and lower prices. That's her problem. But Dr. Wolf, considering there are 6 nationwide chains, over 50 brands underneath them, as well as hundreds of notable local chain stores, and each have to buy the product from someone else, why put the blame of high cost of food on the grocery store and saying that that's the monopoly, rather than looking at your own policies that you've put in, the regulations that you put in that cause these costs to be so high in the first place?
Well, you're right, it's not an either or, but we've had a long tradition going back at least to 1890 in the Sherman Antitrust Act, in 1914, the Clayton Act. We are a nation that at least verbally says it is dangerous to allow a handful, in this case, 4 or 5 monster supermarket chains to have the kind of hold they have. They're the major buyer for the farmers to sell their goods, and then they're the major seller to us. That puts them in a very powerful position, which we are on record as a nation being opposed to. I think Elizabeth Warren is absolutely right. That's part of the story, but that's what I meant before when I said these things we've allowed to develop without opposition, neither by Trump nor by Biden, nor the ones who came before. And now we're going to see how we have to reap the whirlwind that our failure to impose antitrust is going to bring down on us.
Well, it's interesting you say that, because you also have to look at what the Fed is doing all this. And Steve, you're now hearing that China is possibly going to lock down their ports, and so this could be just the beginning of an even bigger supply chain issue on this one. But what role is the Fed playing? As we're talking about rate increases and the hikes that they're talking about, raising the hikes there, is that possibly going to help, or is that going to continue to hurt? Is that what the Fed needs to be doing right now?
Well, first of all, I'll disagree with Dr. Wolf. Elizabeth Warren is absolutely clueless. She and the Biden administration are spending too much time trying to point the fingers of blame rather than actually solve the problems they have created. First, they were blaming the ranchers and meat growers. Then they were blaming the packing plants. Then they were blaming the grocery stores. The bottom line is none of this stuff gets to the grocery stores unless or until you can transport it from the farm to the packing houses and then to the grocery stores and restaurants. When fuel prices have increased over 50% in the last year because of the policies of the Biden administration, administration, we shouldn't be surprised at the inflation and the high cost of everything going up. There isn't a magic energy policy, but we did see the destructive energy policies of the Biden administration now sticking it to us in the pocketbook. I'm very concerned that inflation and what the Fed is doing, we're going to see the interest rates go up. Keep in mind, we have borrowed trillions and trillions of dollars, and when those interest rates go up, the cost of what our government has to pay for bonds to pay the interest on the debt they've run up. And again, both parties have done it, but we're now in the trillions and trillions of dollars. That's going to raise the price that the government has to spend just on paying interest, and they can't spend it on buying stuff for the American people.
Yeah, when those credit card bills start coming in, it'll be interesting to see if the workers then decide to jobs and if those jobs will still be there. Steve, Dr. Wolf, thanks for the conversation. Now, despite the multiple issues here at home, the representatives from the United States continue to speak as though they are ready to fight if their wishes are not acted upon. But just like every other industry in America, our military forces are also facing a labor shortage. So much so, the United States Army is now offering the largest enlistment bonus ever at $50,000. Now, this incentive is for qualified recruits who sign up for certain career paths, and they must agree to a 6-year active duty enlistment. Now, the blame for low numbers is being put on the pandemic and the lack of recruitment allowed in schools. But is there more to it? So let's ask Colonel Rob Maness, a 32-year-old USA combat vet and host of the Rob Maness Show. Rob, thank you so much for joining me on this. Is money actually the reason why enlistment numbers are down right now? I didn't know that you could put a price on patriotism.
No, it's not money. And yeah, COVID may be part of the issue, but quite frankly, we have an all-volunteer force. And if you look at things like casualty numbers from Iraqi freedom, 3,465 white males died in that of the 4,418 Americans killed in Iraqi freedom. And the military is opposed to white males right now. My white male son just left active duty this year. And his peers, he was an NCO, a non-commissioned officer, his peers are leaving the military in droves. And of course, when you fire people for not taking the vaccine, it's very difficult to get folks that don't want to take the vaccine for various reasons, most of them legitimate, to join the all-volunteer military. And they're not going to be able to put their money where their mouth is about Ukraine and Taiwan or anything else. In my opinion, they're talking too much about that and making more of a deal out of it than it really is.
Well, obviously, fear is one of the best factors that they use right now to motivate or to scare people, whichever one that they want to do. And I think it's about the diversity. I agree. Diversity is very important within all forces. But what the wokeness, I think, is what is scaring people away. This idea, it's not even just about talking about racial lines. It's also about every other kind of line that our military is focused on, rather on actually creating a strong military. $50,000, great signing bonus, and the U.S. military says that allows them to compete against private corporations. But that makes people think that the military is a typical 8-to-5 job. Therefore, do you think it's actually going to change anyone's mind who wasn't already considering? Is someone going to say, I'm not going to go take a cushy computer job because I'm going to get $50,000 to go put my life on the line in a foreign land because a politician wants to send me there?
It may change one or two people's minds, but it's not going to change anybody's mind overall. As a matter of fact, Americans don't want to die for Ukrainians with the Russians, and Americans don't want to get into a war with China over anything. That is our bottom line here, and it requires Americans to volunteer to serve in spite of bonus incentives and those kinds of things, because you're not going to get the numbers that you need with a monetary bonus like this $50,000 bonus, although that's pretty high. There will be a lot of people that do decide to take it. But the real question they have to answer is, do I want to die for this regime that we see now that doesn't even approve of people that support the values in our Declaration of Independence and the Constitution of the United States? That is ridiculous. And American, especially men, are not going to sign up for it, and they've got to come to the realization, Scotty, that it is white males that volunteer, most of them from the South, and that die for this country in these wars. The statistics show it. over and over again, between 70 and 85% of the combat casualties in the United States of America in all of our wars has been white men. And if the Department of Defense continues to be anti-white male, which is exactly what the wokeness and the diversity political officers that they're putting in place are doing, they're not going to get the volunteers. And you know what? I'm going to push my congressman to eliminate the selective service so there can't be a draft to back up these unnecessary threats of going to war with countries that we don't have to go to war with.
Well, I want to thank your son for your service. Thank you, obviously, for yours as well. And I think that's important that we have recruitment of all kinds. I think that's the sad part. Is it? Unfortunately, bullets don't know any color when they actually go and hit. The enemy is the one that does that. And in this side, I think that it's the irresponsibility that we have come after Afghanistan. 20 years of Afghanistan and leaving people behind. I think that right there. What person wants to sign up for that job of just being pawns of politicians? In fact, I'm one of those that believe that if you get elected to office, send your kid first over to a war that you start before you send mine. Colonel Manis, thanks for joining us.
Exactly.
When we come back, what does the Supreme Court ruling on vaccine mandates mean to the Biden administration? Specifically after Vice President Harris had trouble responding, when will Americans receive at-home COVID tests? There's a lot more after the break. Welcome back. We want to get to developing news out of the Supreme Court. The conservative majority court has blocked the Biden administration's COVID-19 mandate in a 6-3 vote. Now, this means that the Supreme Court ruled forcing companies with 100 or more employees to require a vaccine or test to continue working is not constitutional. However, the court did uphold the mandate for healthcare workers who receive Medicare and Medicaid services by a 5-4 vote. Basically, if the hospital receives money from the government is allowed to issue the vaccine mandate. So to discuss, I want to bring in Steve Gruber, host of The Steve Gruber Show, alongside attorney Lionel of Lionel Media.
This was based on an OSHA statute. OSHA says workplace requirements, workplace, open saws, lighting, workplace. The Supreme Court merely read the statute, read the act, and said, COVID is something that we risk on a daily basis that has nothing to do with the workplace. Now, it did say, if you happen to work in a let's say a confined area where you're cramped, that's one thing. But this basically just was common sense. As to the second case involving healthcare workers, they're oftentimes required to go through a regimen, a series of basic health-related procedures. That makes complete and total sense. So this is not so much the Constitution, but common sense. And it sends a message that you cannot extrapolate COVID fear everywhere. It has to make sense. And that's what today was about.
Lionel, I miss common sense. I mean, it's almost like